Imagine being a French knight in 1302. You've got shining armor that cost more than a peasant's entire village, a war horse that eats better than most people, and a mustache so magnificent it has its own Instagram account. You're basically medieval Superman. And then, a random dude with a pitchfork sends you face first into the mud like you just got rejected by medieval Tinder. Welcome to the Battle of the Golden Spurs, where France's finest heavy cavalry learned that sometimes David doesn't just beat Goliath, he absolutely embarrasses him. Today, we're diving into one of history's most shocking upsets, where the myth of knightly invincibility got absolutely wrecked by some very angry Belgian farmers. And yes, I said Belgian farmers. This is going to be good. First, let's talk about why knights were considered basically unstoppable in 1302. Picture this: you're a medieval peasant, and suddenly a knight rolls up to your village. This guy is wrapped head to toe in plate armor that could stop a crossbow bolt, riding a destrier, that's a war horse, that's been trained specifically to trample people like you. He's got years of combat training, superior weapons, and the kind of swagger that comes from being born into the medieval equivalent of the 1%. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of tanks, except with more body odor and a disturbing obsession with honor. For centuries, these armored aristocrats had dominated European battlefields. Infantry, peasants, they were just speed bumps with legs, or so everyone thought. But in 1302, in a muddy field outside the town of Courtrai, that confidence was about to get a reality check that would echo across Europe. So, why were French knights in Flanders in the first place? Well, it all comes down to medieval economics, which is about as exciting as it sounds. But stick with me. Flanders, basically medieval Belgium, was absolutely rolling in money. We're talking about the Silicon Valley of the Middle Ages, except instead of tech bros, you had cloth merchants. The Flemish were making serious cash from their textile industry, turning English wool into fancy fabrics that everyone wanted. Naturally, France looked at all this wealth and thought, hey, we should definitely tax the hell out of that, because nothing says friendship like aggressive taxation. The Flemish, understandably, were not thrilled about this arrangement. Basically, it's medieval Belgium saying, you can't tax my beer and waffles, France. This is our beer and our waffles. Tensions boiled over when the French started appointing their own governors and basically treating Flanders like their personal ATM. The locals had enough. Revolts broke out across the region, and suddenly every guild member from shoemakers to brewers was grabbing whatever sharp objects they could find. The French response was predictable. Oh, you're rebelling. That's cute. Let's send in the knights. Because in medieval France, the solution to every problem was more knights. Enter Robert II of Artois, basically France's answer to hold my wine and watch this. He assembled a force of about 2,500 heavy cavalry, the absolute cream of French nobility. We're talking counts, dukes, and knights whose family trees went back to Charlemagne. These weren't weekend warriors. These were professional killers who had been training for combat since they could walk, riding horses worth more than entire villages, carrying weapons that cost a small fortune. On the other side, the Flemish militia. Picture this: a bunch of guild members, weavers, cobblers, blacksmiths, who had exactly zero formal military training but maximum attitude problems. Their main weapon, the Godendag. Now, this sounds like a friendly greeting, but it's actually a terrifying club spear hybrid that roughly translates to good day, in the same way that a baseball bat to the face says, hello. It's like an RPG party made up entirely of blacksmiths and angry shopkeepers. But somehow, against all logic, it actually worked. The French knights looked at this motley collection of tradesmen and probably thought, well, this will be over by lunchtime. And technically, they were right about the timing. July 11th, 1302. The French knights are lined up, polished, and ready to demonstrate why feudalism is the superior social system. The Flemish militia is standing in a field, probably wondering if their life insurance covers trampled by angry French aristocrats. But here's where the Flemish showed they weren't complete idiots. They had chosen their battlefield very, very carefully. The ground around Courtrai was marshy, basically a medieval slip and slide designed by nature to humiliate anyone on horseback. Horses, it turns out, don't like ice skating on mud. Who knew? The French knights, confident as always, decided terrain was for peasants and charged anyway. Because nothing says tactical genius like ignoring the environment you're fighting in. What happened next was like watching a medieval version of America's Funniest Home Videos, except with significantly more death. The Flemish had formed tight infantry formations with their pikes and godendags. Think rugby scrum meets medieval porcupine, but with more stabbing and fewer rules about biting. As the French knights charged, their horses immediately started sinking into the soft ground. Suddenly, medieval Europe's elite heavy cavalry looked less like unstoppable killing machines and more like very expensive lawn decorations stuck in the mud. The Flemish militia, seeing these supposedly invincible knights flailing around helplessly, decided it was time to introduce them to the business end of a godendag. And business was booming. When the dust, or in this case mud, settled, the casualty count was absolutely staggering. Over 1,000 French knights lay dead in the marshy fields of Courtrai, including some of the most important nobles in France. We're talking about counts, dukes, and knights whose deaths would leave gaps in the French nobility for generations. Robert II of Artois himself was among the casualties, which probably wasn't great for his career prospects. But here's where this story gets wonderfully medieval. The Flemish weren't content with just winning. No, they decided to get creative with their victory celebration. They collected over 500 pairs of Golden Spurs from the fallen French knights. These were basically the medieval equivalent of designer shoes, symbols of knightly status, and hung them as trophies in the Church of Our Lady in Courtrai. It's like a medieval participation trophy wall, except instead of participation, you won because the other guy face-planted into a swamp while wearing 60 pounds of metal. The battle became known as the Battle of the Golden Spurs, and those trophies stayed in that church as a constant reminder that sometimes David doesn't just beat Goliath, he takes his shoes. The shockwaves from Courtrai rippled across medieval Europe like the world's most violent software update. Suddenly, the myth of knightly invincibility was dead and buried in Flemish mud. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a complete paradigm shift. For the first time in centuries, heavily armored cavalry had been utterly destroyed by infantry, peasant infantry. Other regions took notes. The Swiss looked at their mountains and thought, hey, we should get ourselves some really long pointy sticks. The English started paying a lot more attention to their longbows. Even the Scots started reconsidering their relationship with cavalry charges. This is basically the medieval version of patch notes, nerf knights, buff peasants. Also, horses are now weak to mud damage. The age of knight dominance was beginning to end, and it all started because some angry Belgian craftsmen decided they'd had enough of French taxation and medieval snobbery. So, what did we learn from the Battle of the Golden Spurs? Simple. Terrain matters, tactics matter, and teamwork beats individual heroics every single time. The French knights had superior equipment, better training, and centuries of military tradition. The Flemish had mud, pointy sticks, and an attitude problem. Guess which one won? In the end, it wasn't about having the fanciest gear or the most prestigious bloodline. It was about using your brain, picking your battles, and never underestimating the power of really angry craftsmen with improvised weapons. The Battle of the Golden Spurs proved that in medieval warfare, sometimes the best strategy isn't charging gloriously into battle. It's making the other guy charge gloriously into your carefully prepared death trap. If you thought peasants wrecking knights was entertaining, wait until you see how the Swiss turned pike formations into an art form and made everyone in Europe rage-quit chivalry. That's coming up in our next episode, so make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments. What's your favorite medieval military upset? Until next time, remember, sometimes the underdog wins not because they're stronger, but because they're smarter. And sometimes they win because the other guy decided to go horseback riding in a swamp.